will be here if you try to smile.
Y'all hadn't heard anything about Mike, have you?
Yes, ma'am. I don't know if you ever seen there's a commercial. It's about some medication, like an antidepressant. People holding up fake smiles. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah, I've got mine in my back pocket. Gene, we just need 7 for quorum, don't we? Yeah. Someone. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Can y'all hear me, Gene? Is this working? Good evening. It's the lights on. It's supposed to be. Testing. It's working now. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. It's nice to see a full audience out there. We appreciate both those of you that are here with us in person tonight and those joining remotely. And we really do appreciate the fact that you care about what's going on in your local government enough to take the time to be with us. Anyone who needs an agenda, they're on the table just to the right of the exit doors as you go out here. And if you're watching remotely, you can get an agenda at Athens-Clarke.com. There'll be no final action taken on agenda items tonight. Discussion will move to our business meeting on July the 5th for consideration and vote. Please turn off any cell phones or other electronic devices you have with you. And if you have brought handouts that you'd like to share with us, if you just hand them to Mr. Berryman, he'll make sure that we get them. Our rules of the commission allow citizens 3 minutes for comment. There's a timing clock on Ms. Spratlin's desk here, which will turn yellow at 2.5 minutes. So please have your comments finished so that I won't have a need to interrupt you. There'll be 3 opportunities for citizen input tonight. The first will be during our special call session for public input on the proposed TSPLOST projects. And then when we get into our agenda setting meeting, the consent agenda is it consists of items 1 through 10, and old and new business are 11 through 16. And we don't take public input on the recommendations from the Planning Commission at our agenda setting meetings. We will have a public hearing on those items at our business meeting on July the 5th. And I'll let you know each time when it's appropriate to come and speak to us. Ms. Spratlin will now move to our public hearing. Would you call the roll, please?
Dickerson.
Here.
Sims.
Here.
Link.
Here.
Wright.
Here.
Bailey.
Present.
Neesmith.
Present.
Bell.
Here.
Harrod. Gertz.
Here.
Hamby.
Here.
Thank you, ma'am. And this is the time that anyone who would like to talk to us about any of the TSPLOST projects that have been recommended to us by our Citizens Committee would please come to the podium and give us your name and address and let us know what you want to talk about. Remember our 3 minutes.
My name is Mike Waldrop, and I live at 359 West Cloverhurst Avenue. And I'm once again here tonight to speak on behalf of the Athens Area Hotel Association. I personally don't believe all SPLOST taxes are bad. As a matter of fact, I serve on the Citizens Oversight Committee for the Education SPLOST. However, there's a time it comes when you have to say enough's enough. That was one of my father's favorite sayings, and what he meant by that was I'd cross the line and there would be consequences. And I think that's the case with this tax. Without going into the specifics of each item, the projects listed for this transportation SPLOST would have been eligible for the last regular SPLOST, but they apparently were not high enough on the priority list to make the cut. They'll also be eligible for the next regular SPLOST if they're deemed at that time to be a priority. So why object now? From the Hotel Association standpoint, we're already the highest tax businesses in Georgia. And we're paying the state and county much more than our investors get in return on their investment. But let's put us aside for a moment and look at why this tax is bad for the rest of Clarke County. First, it's regressive. For those 36% of our people who live in poverty, this amounts to a 1% pay cut. In other words, those who are least able to afford it are the ones who will be most affected by it. Second, it makes Clarke County that much less competitive for retail businesses, restaurants, and yes, hotels. A macro example of this would be Costco. The average store has gross sales of $107 million a year. 1% of that's just over $1 million. Do you think they're willing to go over the line for $1 million? As someone who looks at the bottom line every day, I understand that if there is a viable option available to locate your new business or relocate your existing business and add 1% to the bottom line, you'll do it. That's a lot of money. To sum it up, we're taxing those who can least afford it and providing an incentive for businesses to locate across the county line for a bunch of projects that couldn't make the cut on the last regular SPLOST. What I'm trying to say, folks, is enough's enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
I'm Russell Edwards from 400 Duncan Springs Road. I stand today to strongly encourage the Mayor and Commission to please place the Clayton Streetscape Beautification on the list of TSPLOST projects. Commissioner Hamby has done a great job leading the ADDA and getting this economic study produced just in time, which shows the economic impact of downtown. 10% of the sales tax collected in the ADDA Authority District 10% of the total sales tax collected by the county comes from the businesses within the ADDA Authority. So plus, I believe 70% of the hotel motel tax, plus around about 770,000 of the business licenses. Downtown contributes a lot to this community economically, but also importantly, it's the first impression that a lot of folks get of our community is taking a nice stroll from the Arch and walking down Broad Street, walking down Clayton Street. And we really need to put our best foot forward as a community when we show folks our historic downtown. It's the envy of the state, if not the Southeast or the nation. And Clayton Street is in horrible disrepair. Central Services is doing their best to keep it together, but the planters are falling apart. There's stumps that need to be grounded. And there's no meaningful stormwater infrastructure. So if you walk down there today after this meeting, you'll see large puddles running across the sidewalk. So visitors and citizens to our community have to walk through that on probably the most contributory thoroughfare in the community towards our tax base. So please put Clayton Street on the list. Let's show Clayton Street some love. Let's support those businesses and property owners who are really contributing to the tax base of this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell.
Good evening. I'm Nat Kirkendall of 108 River Bottom Circle here in Athens, and I'm here as the chair of the Oconee Rivers Greenway Commission. As all of you know, I believe that we have worked with Leisure Services to request $12 million for Greenway Trail construction. There is ongoing construction right now from SPLOST 5 and SPLOST 11 work, and this would fill in some of the gaps in downtown to make it more of a straight transportation route for the public. What we're proposing are 3 different projects within this $12 million amount. One is to complete the SPLOST 11 project that is running to College Station Road from Oconee Street, and we're anticipating there may be a lack of funds toward the end of that project, so this would go to supplement that. Also extending the North Oconee River Greenway Trail along the river from College Avenue, where it now diverts over to Willis Street, all the way to East Broad at Dudley Park. again, to make it a continuous project and a continuous transportation route. And then finally, constructing the trail at Dudley Park with a bridge over Trail Creek at its mouth, and then a passageway under the Oconee Street Bridge, working with Georgia DOT to provide that. So that means you can go from the Nature Center at Sandy Creek all the way to College Station Road and only have to cross 2 roads in that process. And at the same time, too, it becomes part of this interconnected network of connector streets, and will connect also with the Firefly Trail to make that really a big part of our bike and pedestrian network. This work, we believe, will greatly improve the pedestrian and bike transportation options for East Athens neighborhoods to access downtown, the UGA campus, the Firefly Trail, and other areas of the county. And it will establish a river-based greenway as an attractive signature feature in downtown Athens for our citizens and visitors. Of course, it'll also enhance health and well-being and safety by providing off-street corridor with increased opportunity for exercise. And of course, all greenways are famous for their property values and commercial opportunities being generated with the greenways. This project is really ready to go. Derek Doster says that with the flow of money being appropriate to the project, they should be able to finish it in 2 to 3 years, well within the 5-year time frame for TSPLOST. And the project is basically, there's just one parcel of land that needs acquisition. It's all in public land. So thank you very much. We appreciate it, and we're so glad the committee kept us in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Nat.
Tyler Dewey, 1075 West Broad Street. I'll just follow up on that and talk a little bit about the sidewalk sort of bucket and the need to fund the upcoming bike pedestrian plan. I think they're going to call it Athens in Motion. I pulled the last version of the sidewalk request list that I saw. It was prepared a couple of years ago. So this is just a list of locations where people have called in and requested the need for a sidewalk. It doesn't necessarily reflect every place of need for a sidewalk, but just the ones where people knew the right number to call up and request for a sidewalk. And excluding projects that are on GDOT right-of-way or that have significant construction issues, there are 140 sidewalk segments on that list. Luckily, thankfully, in this latest FY17 or FY18 budget, Transportation Public Works noted they added a bit of a performance measure and indicated that they want to do 2 sidewalk projects a year. Well, at 140 sidewalk requests, which may not equal the need for sidewalks, at 140 projects, it will be 70 years before we're caught up on building existing sidewalks. And again, that's not including projects that are on the GDOT right-of-way, and that doesn't include projects with significant construction issues. So if we don't fund sidewalks adequately in TSPLOST, we don't seek other ways of funding sidewalks. It's a long time to wait for a sidewalk if you've made a request. So just something to think about as we go on finalizing the list of TSPLOST projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dewey.
Good evening, guys. I'm a little wet. I'm kind of afraid to touch anything. My name is Gretchen Elsner. I get my mail at Box 562. I am very grateful to everyone who's contributed to all the committee work that's gone into bringing this referendum before you and ultimately the public. When I went to the input session at the library, I asked a number of the committee members if they felt that speaking openly about the climate change implications of not just the way that we manage our streets and stormwater, but also our moving our culture away from such a car-centric modes of transportation. That's just in my mind, the environmental benefits just are one of the highest gains. And the response I got was pretty unanimous that to talk about climate change openly on the part of public officials it just seems like something that you don't do because it might antagonize people who feel as if it's still a point of contention. You know, and I get that. I mean, it's kind of heartbreaking, but I thought, well, maybe I can find some way to offer a solution to this conundrum. So I went to our Public Service Commissioner, Tim Eccles, who is, you know, really all about, he's got his Energy Roadshow, and he's all about transportation stuff and trying to get us on electric cars, and he's one of the only pro-solar PSC commissioners, and he's a Republican, an evangelical Christian, and I was like, all right, I bet you he can help explain this to me. So I asked him, you know, how is it that you speak with your colleagues on the Public Service Commission, with your fellow, you know, Republicans? And I don't mean to, I'm not trying to be disparaging in this, I'm just trying to find a way to communicate more clearly. I asked him what it is that really inspires him to step up as a public servant, as a public official, as a person who's, you know, speaking out about what their values are and engaged in public service. And he said, well, honestly, Atlanta is one of the largest markets for sex slaves in this nation because in many cases in communities around the world where they lack the kind of infrastructure that we have the opportunity here to fund, you know, when large extreme weather events happen, be they large storms or droughts or many times communities are decimated to the point where they have nothing left to sell but their children and their daughters. And we have an international airport in Atlanta, and I don't know if I can express to you how strongly I appreciate his call to service and his ethic and his courage to speak out about an issue that it really transcends all other agendas, really, you know, whether they're political or spiritual or what have you. And I thought, well, this is a really compelling way to put it. It's almost a little bit more offensive to talk about than climate change. So I just wanted to put that out there. If you feel like you're nervous to, you know, just go ahead and say that climate change is real and we can do something about it at one penny at a time, then that's my 2 cents for you. And thank you so much for all your good work.
Thank you, Gretchen.
Thanks.
Hello, I'm Mark Ralston, 190 Pendleton Drive, and I'm here. Boy, there are so many things about this package that's come before you that I could talk about and support. So I'm going to limit my comments to the Firefly Trail. The Citizens Advisory Committee did a fantastic job of taking an enormous amount of requests and condensing them into the priorities for this community, and we are so honored that Firefly Trail was listed as one of those top priorities. As you know, it's a $16.8 million project. That's a huge amount of money, but we think it's worth every single penny. So when Georgia Department of Transportation asked Georgia Tech to do a study, an economic impact study, they found that the Firefly Trail as an entity, the whole thing will generate $14.7 million of economic impact per year. If just half of that accrues to Athens-Clarke County, we'll pay for this section of the trail in 3 years. This trail touches the Greenway. It serves the entire east side of the community. It will link to neighborhoods from Spring Valley Road and Winterville Road all the way out to Winterville and the Oglethorpe County line. That's a resource that people don't have currently in those areas. It's a tremendously underserved area, and this will give them an opportunity to exercise, to get recreation, economic development, and safety. And I want to note that since 2014, we have had 3, I think, cyclist deaths in Athens-Clarke County, and all of those have been in the corridor that will be served by the Firefly Trail. So this is an important resource. It's not an amenity, it's a necessity. And we urge you to support the Firefly Trail and the whole package that has come to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark.
Hello, I'm Devin Clower, 375 and a half Holman Avenue. I am here to speak on the importance of adding the Clayton Street Beautification project back onto the TSPLOST list of projects. Because of the economic impact that downtown has on overall Athens and the amount of visitors who frequent this vibrant area, we need to invest in the beautification of our beloved downtown district. The overall benefits of this project will affect the future of our city and the reason that people love to come here. As a business owner on Clayton Street, I can't stress enough how much help that our loved street needs. The sidewalks, the street, all of it. Everyone's doing as much as they can, but it could look a lot better than it is. And I know that the passion and the love is there, so we just ask you to put it back on the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Clower.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm Sandy Huzak, co-owner of 151 and 153 East Clayton Street. We bought our property in 1982. So we have been indeed long-term business owners, and currently my husband and I are living on the top 3 stories of our beloved Clayton Street townhome. Our tenant is Fringe. We have had a succession of 3 tenants. We are delighted to have Fringe with us. We used our building at the front end as an incubator for our family enterprise. We were bought out in the year 2000. So now we're looking at downtown Athens as a place to entertain friends and family and to also age in place. I will tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that I think the downtown area, Clayton Street, is facing huge liabilities. This has not been mentioned tonight, but I will tell you that we have standing water, not just in front of our property, but across the street. I will also tell you that when we came in this evening from grocery shopping, we had waiting water on the sidewalk. And of course, there are the inevitable sidewalks with perils for walking people that are not in my position as an 80-year-old. So I would like to tell you that since we came here to join the University of Georgia, the University of Georgia has really leapt forward. I do not see Clayton Street following in that accelerated pace.
Thank you, Ms. Husak.
Kelly Happy, 620 Talmadge Drive, Athens. Tonight, I'm speaking in support of the Highway 29 corridor expansion that was included in the final list of projects by the Citizen Advisory Board. This was a proposal that was put together by my organization, Athens for Everyone. I serve as their president. This would be a very small percentage of TSPLOST funds compared to other projects, but would have a significant impact on the people who are currently not served at all by Athens Transit along that corridor. Previous attempts to serve that corridor have failed largely because it wasn't an actual full route expansion and it was very inconvenient and difficult to use. This proposal would amount to a purchase of a bus and the operation of a bus to extend Route 24 a couple of miles and serve a number of residents along that corridor. Even if you aren't impressed by projected ridership, even though I think it's going to be a lot higher than it was through last failed attempts, even if you aren't impressed with the ridership numbers, consider that it would be the right thing to do, that access to public transportation is a basic human need that would absolutely be served by including this in the final list of projects or keeping it on there. Our research through surveys and town halls shows that this is a very significant need. This is why my group proposed this to begin with. And as we've seen these last couple years, the expansion of transit has amounted to a significant increase in ridership and an acceptance and support of transit. And I'm talking here about Sunday bus service. I'm talking about fare-free service for youth. This would be along those lines in that kind of spirit. The advisory committee made a lot of tough choices and kept this project on the final list. I thought about this when I was thinking about, I've been privileged to serve on the Envision Athens stakeholder committee these last months, and transit came up an awful lot. So I'd like to speak to that. It's good that we're having a TSPLOST vote and addressing these needs, because this came up throughout the entire days of meetings. What was also clear is that we would have to make some very difficult choices. The Citizen Advisory Committee that has finished their deliberations made those tough choices, and I urge that you consider that and keep this project and keep their list of recommendations intact. If you feel the need to rearrange funding, consider taking some of the money away from paving. That is a huge part of TSPLOST funds as proposed by the Citizen Advisory Committee. There's a very good argument to be made that paving should be more of a routine transportation maintenance that shouldn't be part of TSPLOST funds. Maybe some monies can come out of there in order to support projects that I know a number of constituents are going to speak for that weren't included on the final
Ms.
list.
Happy, I'm sorry, your time's
Thank you
up.
very much for
And your first
work
name was
on
Kelly,
this.
is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, we'll make sure I had it right. Thank you.
I'm George Chandler. I live at 106 South Main Street in Winterville, Georgia. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight concerning the proposed TSPLOST program. I'd also like to thank the Citizen Advisory Committee for the work they did in evaluating the various projects that were submitted for consideration. I did notice that according to the Athens Banner Herald story that the CAC presented to the Commission, that the absence of the criteria was a cost-benefit analysis. That is, the cost of a project divided by the benefits of that project. In other words, if it costs $1 to build a project and you receive a benefit of $1.25, then that's a pretty good project. On the other hand, if it costs $1 to build a project and you get 75 cents for that project, then that would not be such a wise investment. I have not attempted to do that work myself, but I'd like to question the project of the Oconee River Greenway at approximately $12 million. Are we not already funding that under our current TSPLOST program? In addition, the Firefly Trail is proposed at approximately 16.7, and apparently that may be a positive cost-benefit ratio, but we need to understand that. In addition, there's another $12 million proposed for the Lexington Road, Atlanta Highway, and the Prince Avenue corridors, which are state highways. There are approximately 80,000 vehicles registered in Athens-Clarke County, and we send 20 cents per gallon for every gallon of gasoline that is purchased to the state highway. You can do the math and see that we spend a lot of money to the state DOT. Why should we spend an additional $12 million on the state highways? The citizens of Athens-Clarke County will have the opportunity to approve this additional tax or to reject this tax. Athens-Clarke County median household income was $38,643. That's a 2015 figure, and that is $12,601 lower than the median Georgia house income, and $17,132 less than the U.S. median household. I would ask that this TSPLOST project be rejected and the next TSPLOST project require 50% of that project to be devoted to transportation projects. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Chandler.
I'm Clint McCrory, 390 Franklin Street. I'd like to speak in support of the Citizens Advisory Committee recommendations. I'll echo what a couple of speakers have said and praise them for the work that they've done. Hard work cutting down to to the budget down to about $100 million. I think they've succeeded in meeting their top priorities, which are to make the projects beneficial to all citizens of Athens-Clarke County, and also to improve all modes of transportation. Of course, almost a fourth of the budget is for repaving, which is controversial since, as some speakers have said, that could be and should be part of routine maintenance budget. But I think it's a good idea to have it included in this in this budget myself, because it balances out automobile transportation with other modes of transportation. And I'm particularly excited about the possibility that this funding would go to the upcoming Bike Pedestrian Master Plan, which we'll see, I guess, next year. I was very surprised at how little comment there was from you, the Commission, at the work session last week. It means that the comments today by the public are somewhat in a vacuum, because we don't know whether your silence last week was because you have something up your sleeve, or because you support the Citizens Advisory Committee recommendations. I hope that it's the latter. Thank you.
Thank you, Clinton. I promise you that there's nothing up our sleeve.
Hello. My name is Paul Butchert, and some of you know me. Some of you probably see me on TV. I give tours based on Athens music history, and I just want to comment on the section regarding the Firefly Trail. I'm all in support of the Firefly Trail. However, I feel that the loss of the trestle that currently spans Trail Creek would be a great loss to the community of Athens. It is an image and an icon that is known worldwide of the city of Athens, and I often, during the music history tours that I do, visit the trestle, at which point people are blown away by its design, and it's like, oh, I've seen this, you know. And the current plan calls for its replacement. However, I don't feel that it needs to be replaced. I emailed you all today some pictures of trestles from various communities across the country that have been restored and utilized in Rails to Trails programs, as well as a video announcing the opening of the largest trestle in Vancouver, British Columbia, which was restored at a cost of only $7 million. Considering that it's probably 20 times as tall as the trestle that we are looking at on Trail Creek, I would imagine there'd be significant less cost in its restoration. My original proposal before the committee was just for the stabilization of the trestle, based on a fact that I called a telephone pole company and I asked them, what's the cost of a 60-foot telephone pole with an 18-inch base and a 14-inch top? And at that time he said, well, if you want the most heavy-duty one, they're only $600. So I believe that there could be significant savings in the restoration of the trestle, and that wording should be placed within any proposal for the Firefly Trail to preserve the trestle as a symbol of the Firefly Trail and to provide a grade level crossing of Trail Creek. I was the one who initiated the first debate of the trestle, and I appreciate the Athens City deciding at that time that it is worthy of preservation, and I sure hope that the current members of the community feel the same way as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bouchard.
My name is Krisha Haig, and I live at 127 Herman Street. And I appreciate all of the work that's gone into the TSPLOST proposals, and I think it's a very important investment for the community. I'm excited about projects like the Firefly Trail if they can happen. I wanted to follow up on what Paul said about the trestle, the murmur trestle. I've lived right near Dudley Park for many years, and I go multiple times a week to the park, and I've watched over the years at how many people visit the park, and particularly the trestle, taking pictures by it, and it seems to be a big attraction. I think it's one of the most impressive structures in landmarks in Athens, and I at the very least, I would like to see it just stay as it is, but I think there could be a lot of potential for more, but it would be heartbreaking to see it torn down. So anyway, I just wanted to throw in a few words in support. I know that we can't have all these wonderful projects included in TSPLOST, but thanks for your work in support of these projects.
Thank you, Ms. Haig. Anyone else wish to speak about the TSPLOST projects? Okay, well, thank you all. We're going to come behind the rail now and go to our agenda-setting meeting. And we will start with items on the consent agenda. And the first order is, I'll let y'all give y'all a minute to clear out. Does anyone need a break? Any of our commissioners? At this time, anyone who would like to come forward to speak to items 1 through 20, which are our consent agenda items, if you would please come to the podium and give us your name and your address and which item you're speaking to.
1 through 10.
Oh, what did I say? 1 through 10. I'm sorry, 1 through 10. Thank you. No one wants to speak to us about our consent agenda. Okay, we'll come behind the rail. Is there any commissioner who would like to remove something? Mr. Gertz?
Number 2, Madam Mayor.
Okay, number 2.
And number 10. Just want them to give me an explanation and then
Melissa, did you want to remove one?
I was going to remove number 2 as well.
Okay. Anybody on this side over here? Okay, well, we'll start with number 2 for whatever y'all want to address on that one.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As noted in the agenda report, there were a number of pedestrian safety enhancements that this body voted on last year. And I think in ultimately passing the motion, we really wanted to have the most aesthetically pleasing, most functional facilities that we possibly could. And so in this location, as with North Avenue and Prince Avenue and Cedar Shoals Drive, we sought planted areas so there would be true pedestrian havens that would be comfortable to wade in as you were trying to cross half a road at a time. And what staff has indicated in the agenda report that we have in front of us is that there may be some challenges in making left-hand turns into a property if one was headed down Baxter Street toward the university. However, what I would like to do is turn everybody's attention to the illustration in our agenda report of the proposed smaller pedestrian island. The suggestion in the text of the agenda report is that this would allow somebody to pass the pedestrian island and then make a left turn into the parking lot. And while that technically is true, there really isn't any deceleration opportunity if you were to, in fact, pass the pedestrian island and then try and take a left turn into the parking lot. You're basically making a sharp left turn out of the travel lane into that parking lot, cutting right across the what would be the turn lane. Given that that's the case, I wonder if returning to the previously approved commission option would simply make sense, that this modification just wouldn't be functional, or if there might be some slightly better place on this corridor within 100 feet or so for this crossing. And I would note that the parking lot in question to the north of this island has two entryways. It certainly is easy and an option to enter that parking lot from the westernmost entry into the parking lot. And so you wouldn't be removing the opportunity to enter that parking lot, which belongs to the business Homemade, if folks are trying to orient themselves, coming either from the east or from the west. So again, I'd like some continued discussion about this, but I'd like everybody to consider that our general approach when we approved these last year, and I think our continued general approach ought to be to have more fully functional, more attractive pedestrian crossings.
Thank you, Kelly. Would you like to just leave this off?
Certainly.
Yeah, I think we need to. Ms. Link.
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank staff for reaching out to the businesses in that immediate area about these islands. I got a frantic text message from one of the business owners who realized that, the originally proposed island would, effectively block her driveway, and, she's extremely limited parking in that business, and really, you can't really turn around in that parking lot, so it would really inhibit access to that business. So we met with Steve Decker, and he came up with these proposals to shrink the island, which I think could be effective. Maybe there is room for more discussion about relocating it, but then again, that is an existing crosswalk, and it can be pretty hairy because it is kind of at the bottom of a hill. So even a small island, I think, could really help with some pedestrian safety there. But granted that we're shrinking the island, maybe that does leave room for a second pedestrian island somewhere on Baxter Street, perhaps uphill somewhere. So I definitely think this needs some consideration, and maybe we can reach out to Mr. Decker and to the business owner and take a better look at how the whole thing might work and discuss some options.
Thank you. Well, we'll leave it off. Leave it off consent. Anybody else want to comment on this one? Okay. And Mr. Sims, you wanted to look at item number 10.
was just, I was talking to Commissioner Hamby, I think. He's on government office. Just could you give me just a little recap? I know you say we wanted to pass that with no action, and the request was to name, change the name. And can you just?
Oh, you want me to give a recap?
You're on the committee.
I am.
He wants an explanation, Mike.
Mr. Harrod's not here, so.
And some other committee members who were there will also help weigh in. I think we were recommending passing no action at this time, Commissioner Sims, to allow us an opportunity to look at our naming policy and how we can modify that to make it more current, I guess, and more and probably a little bit easier for us to consider naming requests as they come forward. And we felt at this time, if we felt at this time we should perhaps do that first before we consider naming changes, not only to this but to others as well from that regard, just to make sure we're doing it right and doing it appropriately and fair to everybody. So that's the way I remember the committee discussion taking place.
Just want to get a handle on it so that
and certainly the consideration for the person involved in this particular project is very worthwhile and something that's very much still on the table as far as the naming policy.
I'm going to keep it on the table, so I just wanted you to know. I just wanted to make sure. I'm fine. Just we put it back on.
Leave it. Okay, leave that on consent. And Harry, I will tell you that at our business meeting next month, I do intend to put that in committee to look at the naming criteria to make sure that we're treating everybody the same, treating all requests the same. So, okay. Well, we will now go to item to our old and new business. Is there any one in the audience that would like to speak to items number 11 through 14, I believe, 11 through 16? Thank you.
Lisa Milet of 237 Hiawassee Avenue. I would like to speak in
Lisa, I'm sorry, give me your last name again.
Milet, M-I-L-O-T.
Thank you.
I would like to speak in strong support of item 14, the proposed changes to the animal control ordinances. Before I explain why I support the changes, I would like to thank the Legislative Review Committee for their work on this matter. I appreciate that animal control can be the third rail of local politics, and so I appreciate the mayor and commission's diving into this situation. While I support all of the proposed amendments, I want to speak specifically about the proposals that animals be microchipped upon reclaim from animal control and that animals being reclaimed a second time be spayed or neutered. To provide some context for the proposals as well as cost information for the full commission and the community. I think these amendments and the other proposed amendments are much needed and represent a huge step forward for both the pets and the taxpayers of Athens-Clarke County. So first, microchipping. Microchipping is a cheap, easy, and permanent way to ensure that animals have ID on at all time. Currently, very few of the animals impounded at our shelter are microchipped or have ID on when they come in, and for a very simple reason. Those that do generally get returned directly to their homes and don't come to the shelter. Microchipping facilitates the quick return of pets to their homes, saving both taxpayers and the owners many of the costs associated with having an animal impounded. Many reclaiming owners express an interest in having their pets microchipped at the time that they reclaim, which should make this change uncontroversial. Under the proposed ordinance, microchipping would cost less for most animals than buying a collar. Where animal control staff could safely microchip the animal, the added cost to the owner would be approximately $5 to $10. Microchipping saves the taxpayers and oftentimes the owner's money, and many owners want it but aren't motivated to do it on their own. There's no reason not to require the animals being reclaimed from animal control that have already been found frequently wandering loose be microchipped to facilitate return in the future. Second, the proposal to require that animals being reclaimed from animal control be spayed or neutered the second time they are reclaimed. Requiring that these animals be spayed or neutered is a sensible measure that increases public safety and decreases long-term costs to taxpayers at only a minimal or no cost to the owner. Intact animals are more apt to wander as they search for mates, and they pose a public safety risk. They cause car and bike accidents, they bite people, and they defecate on other people's property, spreading disease. Altering animals whose owners cannot contain them is a way to reduce all of these hazards because it reduces the propensity to wander and reduces aggressiveness, as well as reducing the high cost to our community of unintended pet reproduction. There are no health or business reasons not to take this approach because of the proposal's exceptions for commercial breeding ventures and for the health of the animal. Moreover, there's no financial reason not to do it. For the past 2 years, Athens Pets, the volunteer group for the shelter, for which I am a director, has offered free spays and neuters for any animal being reclaimed from animal control. We have committed to continuing this service for at least 1 year after this law takes effect, and I have provided county staff with information about grants for which they may be eligible for this purpose.
Lisa,
I know there's other
I hate
folks.
to interrupt you, but your time's up.
Can I just ask the other people to stand so that nobody else speaks in
You mean
support
people
of
that are
this from my group?
Well, I will tell you, I support you too. That our committee did a wonderful job on this, and while you all are still here, I want y'all to hear me say that, and I'm sure you agree. So
I
thank
do,
you.
very much. Thank you very
Lisa.
much.
Can't stop you, can we, Ed?
Well, it won't be long, thank goodness. I just want to, I've been a resident of Athens for a long time, and Ed Allen. Well, excuse me, I thought everybody knew me, but my name's Ed Allen. I'm an attorney in Athens. I've worked with Bill for years. I know most of the people on the commission. What I wanted to say, and it's very simple. The woman that just came before you has been working with the commission, and she's been working with Bill, and I want to congratulate the hard work he's done. You see, I have begun to help her, and we did some work with the legislature, and I think it was very productive last year. And the legislature asked us, tell us what we need to do. Well, this lady here is awesome, and she teaches the course at the University of Georgia, and she's very practical. And when we talked, Bill and I, the interesting thing about her is she's very supportive of your animal control, but she has the answers, and she's willing to help you at no cost. You see, I'm here with her because the animals don't have a voice, and we're going to be their voice. And you know what? I believe you're going to be their ears. I encourage you to let her, over the next few years, while she's here, and she teaches the course at the law school, to invite her back so that we have the best program in the state, and so that other people, Gwinnett and others, will follow Athens' example. Athens has always been a leader in this state, and we need to do the right thing for the animals. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Anyone else wish to speak to us? Okay, we'll come back behind the rail, and now we'll go to our Planning Commission recommendation items. And, I'm sorry. Oh, I thought, well, I'm sorry. I'm just skipping right over. Commissioners don't count, only the public input does. Okay, Commissioners, we will now go to item number 11 for discussion. Anyone want to speak to that one? Okay. And that's the potable and non-potable water line programs. Very exciting subject. Item number 12 is our pavement maintenance project bid and award. Would anyone like to speak to that?
Item number 11 on the consent. Basically, what they're doing is combining two programs, putting them together, and making them more efficient. I think is what we're
Thank you,
really
Ms.
looking
Sims.
at.
I think that'd be great for
And
consent.
I think that would make that makes more sense to do it that
Take
way.
one off, put one on. Okay. So item number 12, does anyone wish to comment on that one, which is the pavement maintenance
Mayor, I actually have
project?
a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So what we have in our agenda packet is a list of FY18 pavement maintenance projects. But we were sent, dealing with TSPLOST, we were sent something on June 14th called paving deficit list. And I'm trying to reconcile the two. One example, because I was trying to I'm trying to understand which list is, like there's a road on both these lists, and I'm just confused why it's on both lists.
Is it the same section?
Yeah, it's so example, there's one on the list that we sent for the deficit, resurfacing deficit. There's a road called Bordeaux Lane between Carrington and Whisperwood Lane, and it is also on our proposed FY18. The one on the deficit is to resurface, but the one on the proposed maintenance PMP is for CHS and CRS. So I'm just trying to understand, are we doing both of those?
I think it makes sense to me, I think, but I thought I saw Drew here. Is he here? Or can you explain it, Mr. Williams?
Yes, I would say, of course, we grade out the roads with what we can afford to do. Those that have a higher rating get the resurface treatment. We don't know if TSPLOST is going to pass. I would say that Bordeaux Lane graded out it's on the deficit list because
it needs to be resurfaced.
It needs to be resurfaced, but this will be an intervention that we'll do.
That's what I wanted to understand. Because I know we've got all these lists, just trying to reconcile it. So that explains it. Thank you.
Great. Anyone else? Okay, we're going to item number 13, which is I'm sorry,
Could that be consent?
Oh.
I don't see any reason for that not be consent. Does anybody have a problem with it being
I have a
consent?
question about it, too. Perhaps it can't be helped, but, in my neighborhood, which is 3 streets, Deerfield, Deer Hollow, and Deer Hill, 2 of those streets are on this list, but the third one isn't. I guess it's out of cycle? Is that the problem? They're not on the same cycle?
Well, I would say that the way that we do the grading commissioner, they're rated, I think that would be a residential street every other year. And some roads deteriorate more quickly than others, whether it's a factor of traffic or,
Well, unfortunately, Deer Hollow, 3 or 4 years ago, got the dip and chip treatment, which is just an absolute mess and remains so. I just would sure like to see if we could get these streets on the same cycle, or, they're equally traveled.
I can get you a specific answer on that.
All right, thank you.
Well, that actually brings a question up for me, Blaine, and you can probably answer it. Because there's a particular street in the neighborhood I live in that's not on either list, and it's horrible. Is it just out of the cycle, on that 2-year cycle, that it would be on neither list?
Well,
it's probably as bad as any street in Athens.
Just to clarify, I think Commissioner Neesmith was asking, he was making an assumption that those roads were were resurfaced or paved at the same time. That's the cycle I think he was mentioning.
But we review every 2 years.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
So I'd have to look.
So is that the most likely reason, though, that it's in the off year of the 2-year cycle?
Well, if it deteriorated rapidly in the last year,
No,
perhaps.
it's been bad for a long time, getting worse.
Can you tell me the name of that street?
Shawnee.
Shawnee?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I just happen to notice because it's in such bad shape. And we've had some other issues down there other than the street, so, okay. Y'all okay with that to be on consent?
No. Discussion.
Keep it on discussion, okay. And our next one is 13, Government Operations Committee's report on the review of the residential parking permit program. And who's our chair on that? Is that?
Andy.
Andy. That's what I thought, and he's, so.
Let's leave it. Mr. Gerson,
I was going to mention for the public kind of a little bit about what's in the update.
Yeah,
so
okay,
that
please do,
they
because
might understand. There's, as everybody kind of in this room, I think knows, a two-phase process. If you're interested in the residential parking permit program, there's sort of a broad field of streets that are eligible to take part in the program. And then there's the process by which neighbors actually sort of get together and become part of the program. And so they actually then have the hang tags on their vehicles for that Monday through Friday 9 to 5 program. Up until this point, that there wasn't a clearly defined process for just getting into that large pool of eligible streets. And what staff has done here is put together an eligibility criteria. And so, for example, they've looked at items like daily non-residents parked on the street that limit or consume on-street parking that residents need to use, that restrict vehicular access for emergency vehicles, that block driveways, that block mail service, that block solid waste, that block school buses or others, or cause any combination of those. So what I think they've done is just provide greater clarity in the screen that gets a street eligible for the program in the first place.
Yeah. And I think the committee did a really good job on clarifying that because that question's come up over and over, how to get on the list. So I think they've done a good job. Anybody that's interested in that, I would urge you to look closely at the work that's been done before we finalize this vote. Ms. Link?
Yeah, I'm glad we're addressing this because there are no fewer than, I think, a dozen streets in my district that have requested to be part of that permit program, and they weren't on the list that qualified. So now there can be a real assessment of them to find out if they actually need to be on the program, and they can put the wheels in motion to get their neighbors on board. So hopefully this will make a lot of people real happy.
Yeah. And I think we need to leave this on discussion. Okay, item number 14, Legislative Review Committee's report on the animal control ordinance. And we've already had some discussion, but Ms. Smith, would you like to?
Yes, ma'am. First of all, let me tell you that Ms. Millett and our animal control superintendent, Patrick, made us look good, and Bill. They did some excellent work and provided us with some really good material that we were able to pretty quickly come to an agreement on some pretty major changes, and I consider them to be improvements to our animal control ordinance. So yes, there will be mandatory microchipping of impounded animals. If an animal already has a microchip and it's not on a register, on a national register, then we will record that microchip, so we won't have to put a second one in the animal. Mandatory spay and neuter upon second impound. The owner of the animal before release will have to sign an acknowledgement that they acknowledge that the next time it's impounded, the animal will be spayed or neutered. And then for classified dogs, mean dogs, dangerous dogs, they must be spayed and neutered upon first confinement or when they're determined to be a classified dog by the court. And then they have to be in a proper enclosure, which has to have signage, and there has to be an annual inspection of the location by animal control. And the owner must notify animal control of the transfer, death, or other change in disposition of that classified animal. So what this is going to do, first of all, is going to save a lot of dogs who get lost. They're going to be identified quickly. It's going to reduce the number of stray animals, I believe. All the research shows that a spayed or neutered dog is much less likely to wander from home and has a better disposition. So that's good for the animal as well. And any of our classified dogs, mean dogs, will be better protected, and the public will be protected from them. It's quite a lengthy ordinance. I encourage all the commissioners to read it and send your questions if you have any and your comments. And I encourage the public to read it and let us know of any questions you might have.
And I don't know who made y'all look good, but I really was impressed with the work in this
It's
ordinance.
really good work.
Because y'all addressed some things that really need to be addressed,
Well,
so.
like I said, those guys did it.
Thanks. Yeah. Okay, and our next item
Madam Mayor,
is.
Madam Mayor,
Oh,
is
I'm
it-
sorry.
That's right. I didn't raise my hand.
No, that's okay. I'd love to hear from you.
Is it possible to put the, it's number 14, right?
Yeah.
Is it possible to put that on consent agenda?
Well, I think because it's such an important issue, maybe let's leave it on the, because it's going to draw more attention, people can pay more attention to it there. And I do urge anybody that's interested in animals in our community to read this ordinance.
That's a reasonable-
And see what a good job our folks did on it, so.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. The next one is the Athens Student Apartments, initiation of roadway abandonment process for Winter Court and a portion of Spring Court, and that's in your district, Mr. Kurtz, I believe you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I met with the interested property owner several weeks ago, and have to say that, really already over the last decade, this property's seen considerable investment and is much improved from its condition, certainly 10 or 20 years ago, if folks were friends with anybody who lived there or spent any time in that property. And the existing owner who's just taken ownership of the property in the last year is interested in some continued upgrades on site. And I think we'll probably be seeing some of those coming to us in the months ahead. Related to that, it seems that they wanted to have control of the streets through that neighborhood to perform some upgrades that the unified government certainly wouldn't be in a position to take care of. I mean, much as we were just talking about a couple minutes ago, some of the repaving and even some of the traffic calming activities, only happen as funds are available. And they wanted to advance more aggressively with some of those upgrades. So I'm supportive of this action.
Well, one of the, we discussed this somewhat in our agenda review committee. That's the mayor pro tem, and staff. And I have some concerns, as I think our staff did, about some of the infrastructure that's there and the ability of emergency vehicles to have access. Because I noticed in the letter that they wrote to us that they mentioned that they would like to be able to put a gate that area. And we do have a significant amount of infrastructure, both, water, sewer, stormwater, that maybe those questions need to be answered before we go into this process. So.
Yeah, I saw that punch list too, and I think we do need language that allows, obviously, safe and easy access for all of that underground infrastructure as well as above-ground safety needs. It's my understanding that staff has kind of interacted with property owners in such a way to make those kind of availabilities real upon need. So I'd be interested in staff working with the applicant to see how we could do that.
Well, I don't have a problem with us starting the process because it's a process. But before we make a decision to do that, I think we need to have answers to all those questions. Ms. Link?
Yeah, I do have some issues with, turning these into private roads and the idea of a gated community in this kind of location. It is pretty in town. And if you look at the location on the larger map, I feel like privatizing those streets would prohibit any potential future connectivity into the neighborhood. There is the possibility that, in the future, things change. What is this going to look like in 20 or 30 years? There's a whole lot of potential, if that street were to be extended and joined up with another street, there's a whole lot of land there that could be opened up for residential development and also, additional access from some of the other side streets. So I have a lot of misgivings about privatizing these streets in this location and in a gated community in this particular location. I don't object all that much to privatizing streets in, more suburban neighborhoods. But with the potential for urban dense development in the future as we grow, I have a real problem with it here. And I feel like this is a place where it's kind of appropriate for the the government to maintain control of those streets.
Anybody else before Mr. Gertz? Go ahead and speak, and I'll come back to you, Kelly.
Yeah, my concern is about the future. If these streets are privatized, then we're no longer responsible for them. And if whoever is responsible for them now becomes unresponsible for them or just decides not to, then we know by experience that that can cause severe problems to the property owners there in terms of their being able to even get mortgages on their homes. So I have a great deal of concern about privatizing a street that we now maintain for that reason.
Of course, this is a apartment complex, not individual homes, but I do understand your concern. There was also a mention of reclaiming the amount of property for density, which to me says there's a possible consideration of total redevelopment, which would not be necessarily a bad thing, but it's just a lot of unknowns. Mr. Gertz.
Just offer a little bit of perspective about how kind of new projects that would come through if they were zoned multifamily. Generally speaking, a new multifamily project that does include some interior roadways that takes you from one building to the clubhouse or to the pool house or to another building would be private. So, were this to essentially be an off-the-ground project, these would come to us as private streets. So that wouldn't be unusual at all. And just around the question of connectivity, and I'm very much a fan of connectivity, and we've talked about a lot of specific corridors, Atlanta Highway and others, where we want to see interparcel connectivity. What I would say is that this is at this point a student-focused development, and the folks on Cherry and Ruth would probably not be interested in seeing direct connectivity from these residents through their neighborhood. So if I had to speak as advocates for those existing residents, I would say the lack of connectivity in this specific case, under these specific circumstances, probably makes those folks happy.
Yeah. Anybody else wish to speak to this one? Okay, we'll just leave it on our discussion agenda because it's certainly not an easy one. Item number 16 is the use of downtown enhancement funds, and that's just a placeholder for right now because the Downtown Development Authority has not met to actually adopt the requests that will come to us for this project. And we'll be meeting, was it next Thursday? 22nd, I think. But anyway, so we will now go to our staff recommendations from the Planning Commission. Mr. Griffin, will you come up here so you can help us? It's like I'd like to see what's going on before we just give away that much.
This is District 9. Yeah. They're really taking a big step.
Just let us know when you're ready, Mr.
I am
Griffin.
ready.
Okay.
Okay, we have 3 and a text amendment for you this evening. The first item is a special use request in an RS-15 zone at 1870 Danielsville Road. One parcel consisting of 5 acres, binding application report, site plan, if approved, as with all of the special uses. There are 2 variances associated. Wow. Sound like I'm echoing. See if that's better. Okay. 2 variances, one for street frontage sidewalk and one for architectural fenestration. If I just sit back a little bit and see if that's better. Okay. Subject property on Danielsville Road, 5 acres. It is part of a larger piece of property that was subdivided for purpose of consideration of construction of church. See the current zoning, single-family residential RS-15, and the proposed would be simply a special use permit. This may be a good one to begin to point out. My arrows came up on that screen, but this property actually has three frontages, as you can see from here: the Danielsville Road frontage, Linda Avenue frontage, and then a small amount of frontage at the cul-de-sac of Howard Drive, kind of in the back. And that will be important when we get to the variance, because one of the wording of one of the variants is a little bit unique in the way that we have, based on the recommendation, the way it comes to you, and I'll explain that when we get to it. But, this is the existing structure that is on the property that would be removed as part of the proposed development. The site plan, there again, you can see kind of in the bottom right-hand corner, the little bit of frontage on Howard, along with the Linda and Danielsville Road frontage. The proposal is for a church with an orientation towards really the intersection of Danielsville and Linda, with parking along the side, front elevation and rear, and then the two side elevations. The fenestration variance that is in question is really related to primarily to the bottom elevation that you see there, and it really only encompasses about half of that total elevation, because you're only dealing with fenestration requirements within certain distances off the road. But the requested variance would be to allow the development of that, what is the right elevation at the bottom, in the manner that you see it, and not the requirement to add additional windows along that elevation. So with regard to the recommendation, the sidewalk variance, it is to approve with a condition, but the condition is that the variance only applies to the Howard Drive right-of-way. So basically, they ask for a variance to waive all sidewalks. This approval basically means you still got to build them on Danielsville Road and on Linda, but you do not have to build it on Howard. So just to be clear with that. And then with regard to the fenestration variance, to build it as I showed you on the elevation just a minute ago, the Planning Commission recommends approval of that variance. And then with regard to the special use permit, it is an approval with conditions, again pointing out frontage sidewalk required for Danielsville and Linda, architectural elevations to meet minimums except for the variance associated, both driveways to be one-way, remove the future parking notation, and I'll show you that in a minute, adhere to maximum allowance, and subdivision plat approval is required for the 5 acres. The future parking that you see up in the top right, just past the second driveway, they were showing this as a future phase 2 expansion. This actually, when you count the seats in the sanctuary and their parking allowance, the development of that second phase would have kicked them over their maximum number allowed and would have required an additional variance. So we're recommending at this point to simply remove it, would make the plan upon approval compliant, and if at some point down the road they needed to add the additional parking, it may be based on more seats in the sanctuary, it may be based on employees as the church continues to grow, or they may be able to ask for a variance at that point. So having said all that, the recommendation, you'll vote for the variances and the special use. Planning Commission's recommending approval.
This is your district. You might comment on it.
So I travel by here almost every day. The Foothills High School central office where I work is in the city of Danielsville, and so my general route is to head up Danielsville Road here at Highway 106 and then to 29. And you've represented this area the entire time I've been on the commission, and since the super districts went away, this has been part of my kind of District 9. And I can just say that there's enormous pent-up enthusiasm in this corridor for the prospect of pedestrian passageway that's safe. Every day when I travel up and down, I see somebody walking in the weeds or in the ditch here. And so I do very much support the Planning Commission's recommendation that we have sidewalk on both the Danielsville Road and the Linda frontage. Unrelated to this project, I met in the last couple of months with Linda residents, and safety, particularly for the kids on the street, was on their minds, and this will help that. I contacted the school district in association with that meeting, about half a dozen school kids living on the street. And as you could see from the zoning map that Brad put up, there's a lot of RS8 and RS5 development right around here. So while you may not see a whole lot of rooftops at this moment, given existing zoning and existing future land use, and really the fact that if you were to kind of punch a hole through the end of Linda Drive, you'd end up almost at the newly constructed Wendy's out there on Highway 29. I mean, I have no doubt that over the next decade, there's going to be quite a bit of development right surrounding this church. So I just want to say all of that to provide rationale for my support of the sidewalks. Regarding the fenestration, I mean, I really think upon canopy maturity, I don't think that's going to be an issue for a passerby, so I support the fenestration that the applicant sought, and agree with Brad's assessment of that future parking as well. So I'm glad for them to join the neighborhood.
Anybody else wants to come? Spay?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Brad, I read through this at least briefly, but I still don't understand why they want the variance on the fenestration. I read the facts and issues. Can you enlighten me a little bit on the need to reduce the number?
You know, I'm not sure that I can really. I can tell you a little bit about the discussion that was had during the meeting at the Planning Commission. I think it largely is related to the floor plan on the inside of the church and the way the church lays out on the inside. I'm almost 100% sure the sanctuary on this layout is to the rear. And so the front goes into areas where there is office space, and not 100% sure. I mean, it may have been a combination of floor plan and just an attempt to try to save some costs with the avoidance of the additional openings.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions?
I'd just like to just say, you know, with us adding, extending the bus route too, this would be a good opportunity as well, since we are looking at extending the bus route out in that area. So I think that's a positive for the church. It could be a positive for the church as well.
Right. Anybody else? Okay, on the next one, Brad, which is...
Okay. Next item is a straight rezone request at 1370 Athens Road. That includes a modification to the future development map from rural to single-family residential, and a request from AR AC3 to RS25 AC3. Property is one parcel consisting of about 8.5 acres. There is a subdivision concept plan that is provided with this submittal that is not binding upon approval, although they are. We have not done a full evaluation of it based on subdivision requirements, but because if this were to be rezoned even to RS25, because there's still 1 acre minimum lot size restriction, I think it's probably pretty legitimate. I don't think they can show you we're only going to do 6 lots and then come back and do 12. I think it's probably fairly close, if not exactly what would happen if it were to be subdivided. This is the subject property. Here, the future land use as currently existing on the left. You see the property is just at the end of the approach for the airport. It is really the first property that is designated as rural, and as you see when we get to the zoning as AR, as you move north along Spring Valley Road, Athens, and that's Rannick that connects across the two. See the change there. I mean, from a staff standpoint, we had a little bit of concern with the location of the single-family residential future land use designation because there's really not anything else around it. But when you look at the zoning, immediately across Rannick and to the west and south, the majority of that property is also single-family residential. Much of that goes back pre-2000 under our old zoning ordinance. Existing zoning on the left, AR. Proposed on the right. You see the property just south of Rannick between Winterville and Spring Valley is also zoned RS25. It's an old conditional use, I think from the 90s, that was done under the old ordinance. Concept plan only, a proposal on how the property could be subdivided, also retaining the existing house that is on the property on one of the lots. I think that's pretty close in terms of what you would get if this were to be approved. And the recommendations from the Planning Commission for both the future development change and the zoning are approved.
Ms. Dickerson, this is in your district. Did you want to say anything about it?
Not tonight. I honestly haven't had time to look at it, so I apologize, but I'll certainly look into it and have some comment next meeting.
Anybody else have any? Oh, sorry, couldn't see.
I was at the Planning Commission meeting, so I had a little insight into this. And, I mean, normally, there's some consternation about opening up AR to more dense residential development, but it makes perfect sense right here. This is actually on the Firefly Trail, and from what I understood at the meeting, the property owner didn't even realize that until he'd already decided he wanted to divide his property. But I feel like we're probably going to see a lot more stuff like this as that trail develops and as people realize what an amenity it is. So, it's something to think about as we move forward with our comp plan is, what kind of development do we want to see in that zone, given the transportation options that are out there in specific areas. So, I mean, this project to me makes sense.
Anybody else have anything to say about this one? Kelly, I'm sorry.
I just also wanted to mention the adjacency to the Firefly, because we probably do want to begin thinking about how, we look for enhanced connectivity to those properties that are both along the kind of future greenway and kind of future rail trail corridors. It's a pretty isolated, small piece of property, and again, right next to some RS-25. So while I've got qualms about kind of making large chunks out of the green belt, kind of higher density areas, I mean, this is pretty minuscule, but again, I would love to see in the comp plan process, and I know, I think Jerry's on the steering group, Jared, excuse me, that this be some piece of the discussion.
Anybody else? Okay, ready to move on?
I am. Next item is a special use permit at 106 Tallahassee Road. It also includes a future development map change from employment to neighborhood mixed use and a special use permit in the commercial neighborhood zoning district. The request specifically is to include a drive-through window to an existing retail use at this location. Current location, if it's not open now, it's close to being open. It's a new liquor store that, by right in a CN zone, was picking it up as the drive-through. Separate use under the ordinance, drive-through is special use. So, I mean, if you were to go by and look at it and say, well, they're asking for a special use permit, why are they already building it? They can build it by right. They just, if without the special use permit, they cannot serve out of the window. That's the, so we will show you. Still becomes a binding plan in order for them to get the window in. They've got to demonstrate that, but without the window, the use is still very much permitted at this location. Subject property just northwest of the bypass on Tallahassee Road. That alignment really does, and we're a little bit off with property lines. You see the existing building down at the bottom that appears to kind of go across the property line, not completely accurate. Future development existing, it's an old employment designation really based on, I think, in large part the use that was there many, many years ago to a neighborhood mixed use as they change. The special use permit symbol placed on the existing CN zoning. And then the site plan, very much like it has already been permitted for a walk-up store, just the inclusion of the drive-through window. And then the landscape plan that goes along with it, and a picture of the front as it's under construction.
It's actually open.
Is it open?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the recommendations from the Planning Commission to include the drive-through window and to modify future development, both were to approve.
This is Mr. Bailey's district.
Yes, ma'am. I do have a question, Brad. Do you know if the plan for this drive-through window is going to include a speaker or anything like?
I do know that, and the answer is no.
Good,
Simply pull up to the window and order through the window
right.
and then wait.
And most of the existing drive-up windows for package stores are like that.
Yes.
I'm just curious, because that would be that would disturb the neighbors. They're pretty close, if it had a speaker.
It is a quarter of the window with no speaker.
Okay.
Is that actually in the special use permit that there's no speaker?
It is not in the special use permit that there's not, but there's no menu board or reader board identified on the plan, so that
So
would
that
give
would
us-
have to be there for them to have,
They'd have to
okay.
come back to add,
Okay.
to add that.
Good. Anybody else? That's right.
Can you give me a little history about why we don't allow these, the drive-up for liquor stores?
I mean, in commercial neighborhood zone, a large part of it is within that neighborhood scale commercial districts. It's still the push towards more multimodal ways of getting to and from. I know when we went through the ordinance changes back in 2000, there was a push to try to, in certain areas, not include the drive-through windows because of just that auto-centric type of design approach. And when you look at a lot of these specific areas, that we were looking at where commercial neighborhood zoning is put in place, it's 5 Points, it's Normal Town, and some of those areas where the thinking was on-street parking, get out of your cars, walk, shop, do that type of work. And it's been that way ever since the initial adoption in 2000.
So it's not necessarily what you're buying,
It is not
it's
at
how
all-
you're buying it.
It's not at all what you're buying, it's
How you're
being
buying
able
it.
to, whether it is a drive-up window at a bank or a
Okay.
fast food or a liquor store, yes.
Okay,
Now, if you don't mind me jumping in again.
yeah.
There was some discussion in the past about not allowing drive-up windows at package stores just because of the mixed messages. You're
Yeah.
driving and you're
Yeah.
getting alcohol, and we don't want people to drive and drink. But currently, it's legal. But there has been some discussion in the past about that.
And I think Mr. Bailey's looked at this pretty thoroughly, so. Anybody else? I guess that, oh, we've got one more item.
We've got
Text
one more.
amendment. Yeah.
To get out of this, we also have a text amendment that is being presented to you for your consideration. This deals with the definition of a drug rehabilitation center or other facility for treatment of drug dependency. That is an existing definition in our ordinance. What we have given you is a current list of the zoning designations where this is a permitted use or a special use today in the code. We're not proposing with this to modify where they are permitted, simply the definition, and I'll tell you why. This did come from staff at the request of an individual that was looking for the ability to do one of the 30-day check yourself in rehabilitation facilities that you stay for a month for alcohol dependency or other. And when we start trying to place that into a use within our ordinance, it really is not an assisted living or personal care facility based on that definition. Really not a hospital or a medical center because they're not providing that full-scale medical service. And it's a drug rehab center. I mean, if you look at, that's what it is, but our definition did not allow for meals or overnight service. I mean, it was basically the walk-in clinics where you come in and are seen and then you leave. We looked at it, we just, from a staff standpoint, it seems like a logical request to modify. We're not asking to put it anywhere else, but simply this would allow those types of facilities that are providing that type of treatment to serve meals to the people that are there and to allow them to stay overnight. That's the only change. And it was a recommendation to approve for the planning commission.
Any questions or comments? Ms. Ryan?
I just want to say I'm very supportive of it for anybody who's getting treatment and needs this sort of help. The more cocooned you can be for those initial times and to have the service and the care given to you with that supportive and positive environment. I found it interesting that that was in there the way it was. And I'm glad that we're changing it because hopefully it'll open up the opportunities for that to be a help for people in the community.
Anybody else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.